of Days Redistricting, and we love working with groups like the League of Women Voters and others who are working on redistricting reform and fair districts. My name is David Rinn. I am responsible for partnerships and some of our media and social media efforts at Days Redistricting. We're a very small 4-person, all volunteer team. My 3 colleagues, Dave Bradley, Alec Ramsey, and Terry Crawley, do all the development and engineering work behind the app. I'm going to do a demo today of our app. It's going to take about an hour. I was just telling Casa during the break, we add more and more features to Days Redistricting, and it gets harder and harder to do the demo in an hour. So I'll go at a pretty fast clip. Casa said she's going to pay attention to chat, and if something pops, she'll maybe pose a question, and I'll also try to take a couple breaks. And if there are questions there, feel free to ask them. One thing, I'm going to share my screen now, and just one thing I want to reiterate, and let me just do this real quick. Since there is a lot in there, and I'm assuming everyone can see the app. This is actually our YouTube right now. Since there is so much in Days Redistricting, in an hour session like this, it's not unusual for you to see something and maybe not quite make sense because I go too quickly, or maybe I don't explain it super well. I'll apologize in advance for that. We have a bunch of resources available for folks to familiarize themselves with the app and learn it. This is our YouTube page. So if you just search DRA 2020 on YouTube, you'll come to this page. We've got a whole bunch of tutorial videos that we've created. They're all sort of 4.5 to 6 minutes-ish. Feel free to take a look at those to familiarize yourself with them. We also have on medium.com, so medium.com/DRA-2020, a whole bunch of articles about how to use the app, and they're organized, draw. So all the ways you can draw on DRA, analyze, collaborate. So again, another really valuable resource to use to familiarize yourself with DRA. There's also the very best way to familiarize yourself with the app is just to use it. Make maps, delete them. You can't break anything. You can't really do anything wrong, but it's really the best way to learn how to use the app. And so now I'll kick off. I'm on the homepage and I'm not logged in. You can see there's a login button, and I'm actually going to stay not logged in for a little bit, because there's a whole bunch of stuff you could do in the non-logged in view, and I want to show you all that, and then we'll log in and start building some things. When you're not logged in, you could get to what we call official maps, and those are current state maps, either at the congressional level or the state legislative level. We actually have 2 versions now. We've got the 116th Congress, and now we've got, with the census having made available as 2020 shapes, we've recreated all those maps using the 2020 shapes as well, so you can see those too. There are 3 ways to get to an official map for a state. You can click the Pick a State button, and this takes you to our map state page, and then you can click on any one of these states. That's the first way. The second way is you can just click on any state, and it brings you to that same state page. Where you can see, again, congressional and Washington, both our houses have the same legislative district, so we only have 2 sets of maps. Other states have 3. And then when you're on a state page, you'll see the current maps. You'll see what we call notable maps, and these are maps that are sort of what I'll call best in class for a particular criterion, like proportionality or competitiveness or minority representation. We have 2 versions. We have the 2010 maps based on the 2010 census. And we also have maps. People are building maps now using the 2020 census shapes and the 2019 ACS data. So we have a version of those as well. And at the bottom of the state page, we've got resources to redistricting resources, Brennan Center, Princeton Gerrymandering, Ballotpedia. And for states that have created and are now running their official redistricting web pages, we've got those links as well. The third way to get to official maps when you're not logged in is to click on this triple bar. And by the way, this logo will always get you back to the home page. If you click on the triple bar, you see this drop down called Maps. And when you're not logged in, the only thing listed in here are the official maps. You can sort these by how recently they've been modified, alphabetical by state. You can also search. So if I type in a column heading with a colon and then WA, for example, I'll see everything that is a Washington state map for that column called state. I could do the same for any of these. You can also just type freehand. So I can, again, just type WA, and anywhere that WA shows up in any of these columns, I can find a map. Super helpful when you're logged in and you're looking at published maps, because we have thousands and thousands of those, but it's just a very useful search tool. So what I'm going to do to start is I'm going to click on the Washington 116th, which is our last Congress, and that's the official map, and click View, and the map will pop up, and it will take a few seconds to color in for the districts, and we'll see the official map. So this is Washington's current map, 10 congressional districts showing. The first thing you'll notice is, since we're not logged in, we're in view only mode. You can see hopefully where I'm moving the cursor. That means you can see all sorts of stuff, but you cannot edit, make changes. In the upper left is a little panel called District Selector. This shows a bunch of things about a particular map. It shows the population for each district and the deviation from the target population. That would be the population with each district having exactly the same population. As you can see, there's very small deviations in Washington state, as is the case for most states. When you're working on a map, you select the district you want to paint or color, and that's the district you'll be working on. There's also this thing up top called that is unassigned population. In a map you're just starting to work on, the entire state's population will be here because you've not yet assigned it to a district. In a completed map, of course, this should be 0, which is the case here. District details, I'm going to pin it, and it pops up in this column here to the right of District Selector. This shows you detailed information about the particular district you have selected in District Selector. So right now I have selected District 4, and you can see the total population for District 4. You can see broken out by race. You can see the voting age population, again with the same breakout, and you can see partisan or voting population. And then, of course, if I switch to District 1, you'll see that same information for District 1. You'll see it for District 8. Okay, as you're working on a map, that's a handy tool to have so you can see how your district is shaping up. I'm going to unpin this now. And next we go to colors, which is down sort of the bottom right here, the colors panel. It is currently set for map colors, and thus the map you're looking at has the same color scheme as District Selector. If I click partisan lean, you now see the partisan lean for each of our congressional districts, very blue to very red, and then pale blue, pale red. So this shows you how Democratic leaning or Republican leaning any particular district is. Right now, map colors is off and partisan lean is off. So all you're seeing are the outlines of the districts with the background map behind it. If I go down within colors to precincts, I can look at that same partisan information at a detailed precinct level. So again, blue to red based on how Democratic or Republican leaning a particular precinct is. I can also look at the demographic data at a precinct level. So right now I have selected all minority groups. I can pick a particular minority group and look at this at a precinct by precinct level. And of course, so we have Native American populations in the state, and here you can see where those Native populations are located.
David?
Yep.
Do you have demographic data that includes gender?
We do not. We only have race, ethnicity, and voting age. And voting age, depending on which data you're grabbing, is either going to be voting age population or census voting age population. We do not have gender in here.
Thank you.
Sure. The next thing I'm going to do, let me actually get back to, let me unclick and go back to map colors. Overlays give you which is down here at the bottom right, gives you a number of ways to kind of visualize your map. So right now I'm showing, I'm showing a background map, I'm showing district lines and labels. And of course we have map colors up here, which give me the map colors. I can turn on precinct lines. I can turn on precinct labels, and these will show you the names of each precinct with a bunch of information about that precinct, which is helpful when you zoom in a zoomed out view. It gets rather cluttered. I can look at county lines. I can put on county labels. I can add city lines, which is a useful thing when you're at the detail level creating a district and you want to be sure not to split a municipality. And landmarks is a new feature we'll talk about a little bit later, but we introduced landmarks when we introduced communities, which I'm hoping something you all are pretty interested in given the work you're doing. Let me just turn off a couple of these things to unclutter it a little bit. Custom overlays we'll talk about a little bit later. This is how you can view a community that you create on your map, and we'll talk about that in a little bit. Moving off these panels here to the map itself now, we have a magnify in out button. This magnifying glass snaps back to the state view. You can view by county, and you can paint by county when we're in edit mode. And you can also view and edit by precinct. Now, precinct lines would be on when you're doing that typically. So that's the useful view here. I also want to point out, let's go back to county. When I'm in the county view, look to the far right of the screen. You'll see a panel called County Details. As I hover over any individual county, you can see that same detailed information we were looking at the district level before. So now here's Clallam County with the population and the demographic information as well as the composite voting. Here's Jefferson County, all over. Same as you move across the map, you see all that information. Similarly, if I'm on the precinct view here in the upper left, now you see individual precinct data. Okay, again, super helpful as you're building your districts. So, and then we get into very dense, King County, you're seeing those individual precincts. I'm just going to close this panel right now to give us a little more real estate. And now I want to talk about tools we'll talk about when we're in edit mode. These are some tools to kind of help you address errors in your map and fix them. I want to talk next about statistics. Statistics, there we go, gives you a bird's eye view of your state district by district. So here we're looking at all that information that we saw on an individual district by district basis in one place. So you see the 10 districts to the far left. You see that the unassigned population is 0, which is what you'd expect to see in a completed map. You can see the populations of each district and the deviations, which are effectively 0%. This column shows you whether or not you have any non-contiguous districts. A green check mark means you do not, which is something you'll want to see. If we had a non-contiguous district, you'll see a red X here, which is something you'd have to go back and fix. This column shows you whether or not you've got one district embedded within another, which again, you'd see a red X if you want, and you'd have to go back, you'd want to go back and fix that. Here you see the partisan lean for each district. Again, the blue-red scheme, and if if a district is not colored, it means it falls within a 45/55% competitive zone. So we deem those districts competitive, whereas obviously an 82% Democratic district would be not particularly competitive. And this red district at 56.8% is outside of competitive, but not dark red. And then, of course, you see all the demographic information for each district lined up side by side. Some people tend to look at statistics when they've completed a map. Other people kind of go back and forth to see how their map is shaping up. It's a matter of personal preference. I like to look at statistics as I'm building a map, depending on what my objectives are. To the right of statistics is a button called Analytics. Analytics is a powerful tool. There's a lot packed in here and a lot to digest. So what I would encourage you to do is go back on your own and spend a little time in here, because I will not do it justice in the few minutes I'm going to spend here. But basically what you see is any map evaluated or rated along 5 dimensions: competitiveness, proportionality, splitting, compactness, and opportunity for minority representation. We have raw data, raw scoring information, which I'll show you below. And then each of those scores is normalized between 0 and 100, with 0 being the worst and 100 being the best. And the most, these ratings are most useful as you look at and compare different maps. So a 78 is better than a 50 and worse than a 85 for a particular map. So this 78 in and of itself doesn't mean anything per se, but it does mean something when you look at it with respect to other maps. And as we scroll down, so here we see all 5 of those dimensions. And then as we scroll down the page, here you see all the criteria, all the requirements are met. You see the green check mark, so you're in good shape there. And here you see a raw score for proportionality. Specifically, it's a disproportionality measurement. You see a description of that measurement, and you see the same rating that you saw in that, what I call that spiderweb graph that we saw above. Similarly, we've got a raw score for competitiveness and a normalized rating. We've got a bunch of data that looks at various statistics for opportunity for minority representation, comparisons versus statewide totals, and a rating. By the way, this I will take you to a Medium article about any of these categories, so there's more help for you there. Compactness, we show the REOC and Polsby-Popper raw scores, and then again, the normalized value. And then for splitting, again, raw scores and those ratings. Going back to the top, I want to highlight one other thing: compare maps. This is a pretty cool feature. We give you the ability to compare this particular map here, the Washington 1/16th, to another. So if I move that toggle to the right, I get a pop-up of similar maps. By similar, I mean same state, same 2010 census data. And I can then pick one of these maps to compare to my map. And the one I like here is, let's look at WA competitive. I think that's the one I looked at before. So this is a map that has been described as a competitive map. When I pick it, I now see a comparison between the WAS 1/16th and that one. And actually, these two maps are pretty similar. You can see the WA competitive map is a bit more competitive, not a ton, but does a substantially worse job on opportunity for minority representation, and is a little bit better on compactness. Now, that actually isn't the map that I liked. Let me see if I can find the map that I liked that I thought did a better job of highlighting, and maybe.
And David, while you're looking at that, Anne is asking if you had an ideal perfect district, it would be 100 on each of those criteria?
Well, so that's what's interesting, and that's a great question. I'm not sure why I'm not seeing the map I wanted to see, so I'm not going to worry about that. Oh, here it is, WA competitive. And this will actually help answer that question.
Okay.
Okay, this is really interesting, and this gives you a sense of actually, it's even less interesting, but that's okay. So 100 just means it is, let's say you find a map that is 100 for competitiveness. That simply means it is the most competitive of any of the maps that was created.
Okay.
It is not possible to create a map that is 100 on each category, because as you know, is sort of somewhat evident by this map, but not a great example. If you want to make a map really competitive, well, sometimes you've got to split a lot of municipalities, or sometimes you've got to create really odd shapes. So you lower the compactness score. So what you tend to see here is trade-offs. If I want to do better in one category, I might have to sacrifice another category. So you will typically see maps that are good in a couple areas, but less good in others, or sort of maybe in the middle across the board. But you're not going to see a map that is 100 everywhere, because that's actually kind of impossible to do. And I'm just going to take one more minute just to see if maybe this is the map I saw before. And if this isn't it, I'm going to give up, because, here we go. So this is a good example. This sort of demonstrates what that last question was all about. So this map, called super competitive, is dramatically better on competitiveness than is the 116th. It's it's about a 75 versus the 40. And it's also, and that's this axis right here, it's also a bit better on proportionality. But look what this map maker did. Compactness went out the window. It looks like compactness is basically a 0, and splitting went out the window. It looks like it's close to 0 as well. So my takeaway from this is the person who created super competitive decided, I'm going to sacrifice compactness. I don't care what the shapes look like. And I'm also going to split lots of counties in order to make my map real competitive. So that sort of highlights, I think, how you can think about trade-offs.
That is so helpful.
Yeah, this tool is really powerful. The other thing you see here, and let me just point out, if you this camera, both anything on here in terms of these little charts and this chart down here, which I'll show you in a minute. If you click the camera, you download a .png, and you can use that to paste into a presentation.
Oh, which is awesome. Two other questions before we move on.
Okay.
From Joanna, is proportionality the same thing as equal population?
No, proportionality is if a state is 60% Democratic leaning and 40% Washington leaning, and you have 10 districts, sorry, 60% Democratic leaning, 40% Republican leaning, and you have 10 districts, you should see 6 Democrat leaning districts and 4 Republican leaning districts.
Oh, helpful. Thank you.
Yep.
And then,
equal population is not on here because that's sort of a requirement of the map.
got it. And then Cheryl, I'm going to have you ask your question about how do I get that radar chart at the top?
You know what? Question asked and answered. Sorry.
Okay.
Thank you.
No worries at all.
Let's keep going.
Now, when you compare 2 maps, you have these box charts that pop up. Now, what this does is this and when I'll apologize now, when I move the cursor, you're going to see a lot of numbers pop up. Ignore them for now. But if you look at that larger dot next to splitting, which is right there, that is the map in question. That's our WA 1/16 map. And what you can see is a distribution for all similar maps along each axis. So for example, you can see as it relates to splitting, The WA 1/16 is in the second quartile. So this is the second quartile. This is the third quartile. And you can see the distribution of all the other maps. And it gives you a sense of kind of where your map compares to other maps that have been created. And so Washington is not a state that's got tons of maps created by our users compared to other states. I'm hoping this group will fix that. But for example, if we were looking at a North Carolina map or a Texas map or a Wisconsin or Michigan, you'd see a lot more because gerrymandering is sort of hot and heavy in those states. And you get a real good sense in these with these box charts about how your map compares to other maps that have been created. Okay, so I'm going to take a quick pause because we're ready to log in now. We've asked a number of questions, but I'll also just take a quick check to see if there are other questions.
I'm just amazed at how much you can do without even having signed in or created an account. That's amazing.
And that's deliberate. And again, it's so somebody can sort of get a feel for what we're up to without sort of the pressure of logging in, because some people just don't like creating accounts. But yeah, any official map, you can see all that information. Okay, so I'm now going to log in. Okay, so we are now logged into my account. And when you log in, you start on My Maps. So these are all the maps that I've created over the last little while. I make them, I delete them because I'm always doing kind of weird, different stuff on DRA. So the big difference now, two big differences, of course, is now you can edit and create and paint. And when I look at this drop down next to My Maps, there's a whole bunch of categories. Okay. First thing is these three things these are labels. Any map that I have labeled is sort of dropped into a folder. So for example, if you look to the right here, I've got a label called Maps for Demos. So I do demos and I create maps for demos. And I put labels on them so I could find them. My communities, any community I've created on Days Redistricting, which is our newest feature, which we'll talk about later, will be in this category. Maps I've recently created, maps others have shared with me, maps I have published, official maps, which is the same list we looked at when we were not logged in, and published maps. I'll click here for a second. And what you're going to see is a super duper long list of maps that other users on DRA have made and published. And you can find anything here. You know, I can search on, let's just try something. Competitive Wisconsin. And anything that's got that in the label or in a name will pop up here. But I can search by, I can search by state. I can see, show me any Michigan state map, and here they all are. And then I can sort of sort them by any one of the dimensions. So I could find who's built the most competitive. And there we are. There's some Michigan maps that have a competitiveness rating of 100. So all different ways you can sort and find stuff among published maps. So there are three ways to start a new map. I can, and while I'm here, I'll just do it. I can click on any published map or any official map, and I can click duplicate, and that creates a copy in My Maps that I can then go ahead and edit. Let me just move this. Sorry about that.
For example, when we looked at official maps earlier, it was the maps that we're voting in from today with 2010 census data. And you could decide that's your starting point for beginning to propose new districts.
That is exactly right. And that is, in fact, what a lot of people like to do. Let me just clear this here, sorry. A lot of people, and I just went back to the homepage, a lot of people will start with an existing official map they'll find a map someone else created. Like I want to create, I'm all about minority representation. So I'm going to find one that I like, but maybe see if I can improve upon it or do something a little different with it. So you can, any map that is official, that is published, you can make a duplicate of and start your work from there. You can also, and I think my screen is just, give me a second here. You can also, so make a duplicate, number one. Number two, if I have created a map on another platform, whether it's one of the other free platforms or one of the premium map platforms called Maptitude, I can export that map from that platform and import it into Days Redistricting as a block assignment file, and I can start editing it there. So if you have used District Builder, for example, or you use Maptitude, you can export from there, import into Days Redistricting, and start to edit the map. So that's another place you can start with a map that already exists. And the other way is you can just start clean. I can click New Map. I can name it. I pick the state, which of course will be Washington. Okay, when I do that, it defaults to the 2020 shapes. So the census, even though we're still eagerly awaiting 2020 data, the Census Bureau has released 2020 shapes, and you can now build maps with 2020 shapes. It defaults to Congress. It assumes I want to make a congressional map, but I can make a state legislative map, or I can make other, or I could do community. We'll talk about that later. It defaults to the expected number of districts we're going to have after reapportionment. So if I was in Florida, I'd see 2 more than Florida currently has. If I were in California, I'd see 1 fewer than California currently has.
David, say more about shapes.
Sure. So every 10 years, when the Census Bureau does its magical work and collects all the data, it also, the finest level of detail for census data is at the block level. As I recall, there were something like 11 million blocks in the 2010 census. I actually have heard there are going to be fewer blocks in the 20. Well, I shouldn't. There already are. I think there are fewer blocks in the 2020 census. So those shapes change with every census. So up until now, the only way to build would have been using the shapes that were from the 2010 census. But now that those shapes are available from the 2020 census, and we've loaded them into Days Redistricting, you can build at that level. And that is the level you'll absolutely want to and need to build with when you're creating your 2020 maps using for the 2020 census. And you can start doing that now. Did that answer that question? That makes sense?
Yes, thank you so much.
And of course, there's the 2020 blocks. They aggregate up to 2020 block groups. And also the census has voter tabulation districts, which is another shape, which we call in Days Redistricting precincts. Our precincts are actually voter tabulation districts in the census. They're not the precincts where you go to vote for each election. So after map settings, and let me just ask, where these questions are great and I love answering them. We're probably going at a little slower clip than the 1 hour. Is that okay? Am I okay at this clip, or do I need to kind of speed things up?
You're okay. This is
okay,
great.
Great.
He loves it.
So data selector, it now allows me to do a few other things with the data I'm going to use in my map, because these allow us to select our primary data sets. The shapes now automatically default to 2020 precincts, because that's really the only way anyone should be building a map. So we have in Days Redistricting the 2010 old census data, 2018 population, which is from the American Community Survey, 2019 American Community Survey, and this thing we call latest. All latest is the latest category in here, which of course is 2019. If the Days Redistricting defaults to latest, What that means is you will start building your map, or you will build your map with the 2019 data. When 2020 becomes available, your map will automatically update to the 2020 data. If you don't want that to happen, just pick 2019. And then your map will not update when we add the 2020 data. You will have the ability to seamlessly press a button and sort of automatically update it. But if you don't want your map to automatically update, you should select 2019. Similarly, the voting age information for the ACS 2018 and 2019 is only citizen voting age. When 2020 comes out, it will be voting age, just like it was in 2019. Sorry, in 2010. So I'm going to stick with latest just for the purposes of this demo. Our election data defaults to composite. Composite election data, and this, we have to fix this because we now have a bunch of 2018 and 20. I have to make a note that we have to fix that. Let me just make a note real quick because we already should. Our election data, when you select composite, picks the last 2 presidential elections we have for your state, the last 2 senatorial elections we have for your state, and the last gubernatorial and attorney general election we have for your state. If you want to, you can select a subset of that data. Most people use the composite because that is the broadest kind of view of what your state looks like from a partisan, with a partisan lens. You click apply. And what's going to happen now is our blank Washington map will show up, and it's ready for us to paint. Now, a few things you'll notice that are different. We have a few new icons, okay? Landmark, I'll talk about when we create a community, when we start a community map. This is pan. When I'm in this mode, which I am right now, you can grab the map and move it around, okay? Paint allows you to paint. So if I want to start painting districts, I can do that. I can change my brush size so that I paint more precincts at a time. So I can make my brush size bigger and bigger. Okay. I can paint at the county, precinct, or block level. Okay. We'll talk about tools a little bit later. And painting is super easy. And there's no right or wrong way to do it. What I tend to do is I tend to start at the county level. And that's because I often start in rural areas where a county is much smaller than a district. And the map is opened with the selection on District 1. So as I click on a county, all I'm doing is adding that county to District 1. And as I add, you can see the population is getting bigger. I'm now up to 574,000 people, and I still need 166,000 to go. If I were to pin district details, I can see what that in-process district looks like. Total population, demographics, citizen voting age population with demographics, and how the partisan lean. Okay. I'm going to unpin that just to give us a little more real estate. And again, recall from earlier, I'm at the county level. So when I hover over Ferry County, I can see in that county panel to the far right that I'm about to add 7,500 people, and I'm about to add 1,400 Democrats and 2,030 Republicans. Okay. So that is painting at the block level, at the county level. Now, if I make a mistake, this is my undo button. It undoes the last thing I did. There's also an erase button. If I click on that, you'll see un is now selected. If I click on this county, it will now put that county back in the unassigned category. So I've now removed 2 counties from my map. If I want to start painting again, I click on the paintbrush, and I'm just going to go back and redo the things I undid. Okay. what you do is you can paint at the county by county level. And then at some point, you're going to get close enough to your population that you're going to want to shift to the precinct. Now, we're not there yet because we still have 158,000 people to go, but just for the purposes of this demo, I'm going to go to the precinct level. So I click precinct. I'm going to zoom in. I'm going to click on pans so I could pull this area to the center of my screen. I'm going to zoom a little more. And now what I can start doing, once I click my paintbrush, is I can start adding precincts, individual precincts to my map. Just like I'm adding counties, now I'm adding precincts, okay? And then similarly, at some point I'll get really close to my population, but I'm off by, you know, hundreds or maybe 1,000, and I'm gonna wanna go to the block level. The way block level editing works or painting works is you click on a block. Sorry, you click on block. You click on the precinct you want to start to paint at the block level. You click on it, and it, what we call, shatters that precinct into its individual block components. And then I can start painting individual blocks. Now, blocks are quite small. And as you can see, look to the far right block details panel. These blocks don't even have any people in them. There, this block only has 6 people, right? This block has 9 people. Particularly in rural areas, you'll see blocks with very, very small populations. But you paint at the block level, and you would keep doing this until you got your deviation down to where you wanted it. At that point, you would click this green check, which, as you can see, confirms those block assignments. And when I click that check, I have now locked in all these areas that I painted blue. And if I zoom out, and of course, this is a very incomplete District 1, but this is what my district looks like. When I'm done with District 1, I can lock it by clicking at the far left here. That makes sure I do not inadvertently do something to District 1 that I don't want to do. When I'm locking on District 1, I cannot take anything away. I can add to it, but I can't take it away. A point I'd make, lots of times I'm working on a map and I click to color something and it doesn't work, and I go, what's going on? Is the site down or whatever? Typically what it means is I've locked a county that I'm trying to change, or I've clicked on unassigned and it's not letting me paint because all it's trying to do is unassigned. Okay. Last thing I would show is, let's just go to District 2 now. So now I'm going to start painting District 2 at the precinct level. You can paint, again, in clicking individual precincts. I can hold my cursor down and then just move it along, and I paint as I move. I can also hold the wind. I'm on a Windows device right now. I can hold my mouse. I can hold Alt, hold my mouse and drag it, and that creates a rectangle. And then when I release, everything in that rectangle got painted. If you're using a Mac, I believe it's the command button. Okay, and again, as I mentioned before, I can. You see, I'm on the smallest brush size, and it's only highlighting a single precinct. If I increase my brush size, it highlights many precincts, and I could paint these all at once. Okay, now obviously I'm painting in a haphazard manner here. I'm just showing you how the painting works. You would be much more methodical than that, but I'm just trying to demonstrate how I paint districts. Okay, I'll pause real quick here because next we're going to do communities and just see if there's any questions.
People were asking at the beginning where you're from, Dave. Where do you live?
Where do I live now, or where am I from?
Both.
Okay, I live in Seattle, but I guess my accent gives it away that I'm originally from New York.
Thank you. And everybody's in awe of the app. This is
okay. Good.
Incredible.
We love to hear that. Now, what I'm going to do is go back to maps. This is our coolest, newest, hippest button, new community. So we have for a while now supported the ability to import as an overlay a community you create on, let's say, Representable or District R. Those are sort of static images you can bring into Days Redistricting if, for example, you want to demonstrate your community on a map. We recently added this community feature. It works exactly the same as maps, but what it does is it creates an object that is sort of treated the same as a map in Days Redistricting. And what I mean by that is this. I want to create a new community. I'm going to name it Salmon, and you'll see why in a second. I'm going to make it in Washington because we are in the great state of Washington. It defaults to community as a plan type. You saw that plan type before when we were looking at these options. Okay. This is about dam removal. My community wants to remove dams, right? It defaults to one shape count because most communities will be one shape, but there are instances where you could have more than one. The label I created up above in name is here. I can change the color. I could make it a cool lime color if I want. And then I hit apply. And I'm going to get a blank Washington map, just like our, creating a normal map. Okay. And here's what I'm going to do here. I'm just going to hide precinct details. And what I'm actually going to do is I'm going to turn off precinct lines because I want to see the background map. I'll zoom in a little bit. And what we're going to do here is our community, because we're about dam removal, is all about the Columbia River. All right. This is our community. And I don't know, I'm making this up. Okay. That's the community. And I'm now going to add a landmark. Okay. And I just click that landmark button and I name it. This is dam number 1 that we want to remove. Okay. I could describe it, bad dam. Okay. I have a latitude and longitude, so I can actually change the location by editing that, or I could actually create the landmark by, if I know a latitude, longitude, adding it, and I could add. And there you go, dam number 1 pops up. I guess I should have made it closer to the river, but that's okay. I want to add a second one because there's actually 2 dams we want to remove. Okay, dam number 2. Not 23, dam number 2. And this is the very bad dam. Okay. And I can't spell, but that always happens when people are watching. Okay. So I have my community. I have my dam. I might want to show other landmarks, but here's my community. I've created the community. That's all there is to it. Now what I would do is I go to a map that I want to overlay this on. So let's go back to my maps. I'm going to now go to my maps. Let's see, I think I created here's a copy of the Washington 20th, 2020. So this is the last map, but it uses the 2020 shapes. I'm going to open it. Now it does take a little bit for this to cycle through, but for kicks, let's see if it works right away. So now I use this custom overlays feature. I click on the cog and I have the ability to add a layer. And this is what I would do if I created a shape in one of those other services and I want to bring that in as an overlay. But the community I just created is actually a map. I click add maps, and what pops up here in my pick list is any map that I have, any community I have created for the state of Washington. And as you can see, the one we call Salmon is already there. I click it, I pick it, and I click apply, and there it is. So I can see my community is within District 5, and I can, zoom in on it. I can, so I zoom in, now the name shows up. I can toggle lines on and off, colors on and off, labels on and off, landmarks on and off. So this is a really neat tool, I think. I could have created a community that maybe sat right here, and I could show my communities being split between districts 4 and 5. I don't want that to happen. By the way, landmarks, you can add to any map. You can have it on your community that you just built, or you can have it on your own statewide map because you want to highlight certain landmarks.
That's amazing. I love this.
It's pretty cool.
Yeah. For communities of interest, this is unbelievable.
Yep. We really hope people will take advantage of this. Now, again, I mentioned already YouTube. We have a 5-minute tutorial on how to create communities. We also have on medium.com a pretty detailed post on how to build communities. So anything I just said is actually in those, sort of probably described a lot better than I just did it, because I was going kind of quick. The last major thing I wanted to show is this tools feature. So what I'm going to do now is I'm going to go back to my maps. I have a map I created. Here you go. Washington with errors. So you can imagine when you're building maps, we haven't zoomed in on a map, but as you all know, here we are in Puget Sound, and you could just see here. I'm going to turn off colors for a second. You see the density of the precincts, which is sort of an indication of density of population. There's just, gazillions of precincts in here. And it can be easy to kind of miss a precinct or paint it the wrong color because, your finger accidentally hits a button. And we have some tools to help you with that. So I'm going to go back to map colors. And if you take a look, I'm going to hide district selector. So 3 mistakes in this map. Here, we see an unassigned precinct, okay? And just by the way, if I show my panel, note in unassigned, there's 942. So that's telling me there's a mistake. Not a mistake, it's telling me I have people unassigned. And if we were in statistics, we'd see the same thing. Okay, I've got this yellow district right in the middle of orange. That's gotta be a mistake. And I have this kind of greenish district. Sorry, did I say district? I meant precinct here, precinct here. I have this sort of, I don't know, blue-green precinct straddling orange and yellow. Now, these are big, obvious mistakes, but if they were in Seattle or Tacoma or even Spokane, where we have lots of small precincts, these would not be visible to the naked eye. And if I were in statistics, I would see, for example, oh, I've got a problem with District 5, I've got a problem with District 6, but I might not be able to visibly see those. And imagine if you're in California, where there's, I don't know, California might have 1 million blocks itself. It might be really difficult to find these without a little help. And we've offered that, we've created that help. So this is an unassigned precinct. If I click tools and click find unassigned precincts, again, we can see this, it's big and visible, but if it were in, Capitol Hill, I wouldn't see it. When you click unassigned precincts, it finds any precinct that's unassigned. And I then can go ahead and paint it. Okay, let's go back to the statewide view. This right here has created a discontiguous district, right? This district, which is 5, has a non-contiguous part. Because of its location, it's pretty obvious that this precinct ought to be orange. And we have this tool called Reassign Stray Precincts, because this bad boy right here is stray. He has gone astray. When I click it, you'll watch it'll automatically fix that stray precinct. Okay. Now, here we have something that also you can consider stray. The problem is, because it straddles these two districts, the Days Redistricting doesn't know if this should be orange or yellow. Now, I happen to know it's supposed to be yellow because I made the mistake, but the Days Redistricting isn't going to presume that. So if I click Find Non-Contiguous Districts, first it takes me to the main part of that district. Then when I click, it takes me to that part that is not contiguous. And now I can fix it. And I know this thing ought to be yellow. And I just paint it yellow. And it is fixed. So those are tools we have to help you find something that has been not assigned or is stray. If we go back into statistics, we should see green check marks where we saw those red X's, and there you go. So we fixed all the problems. Okay. Last couple things I want to highlight real quick. Actually, let me go here. Actually, let me go to a map. Feedback, if you find something that you think is a mistake or a problem, or you just have a question, you can click that and enter it, and it gets emailed to us and someone will respond. You can share your map. So if I click that share button, I can email that URL to anybody, and anybody on DRA can get a copy of that map and start editing it. If I click allow editing, this is sort of a Google Docs kind of framework where we can jointly edit it. So I can click allow editing, copy the URL, email it to Casa, and she and I can work on that map together, and I can make a change and she can see that change real time, and vice versa. We can share it with 2, 3, 4 people.
And that's
okay?
without yet having published it, correct?
It's not published. It is just available to you and me and anyone else we shared it to. The only way to publish is to actually publish a map.
Perfect. Thank you.
Your map is private until you publish it. I can export a map as a block assignment file or as a GeoJSON, and then it could be worked on another platform. This is a really cool feature. It's 3 a.m. and you've been working all night, and you realize you made a mistake, and you have no idea when you did it because you're on your 12th cup of coffee and you're all jittery. We keep a history of versions of the map you've created, and you can go back to the one that you were on before you started, your work at 2 a.m. and know you haven't made a mistake there. It's before the point in time where you've made a mistake. Help offers you a lot of help on the map, on the service. And then that's kind of about it. We are not a 501c3, but we self-fund this ourselves, and we're always happy if people want to help support our efforts. In fact, we're going to launch a GoFundMe pretty soon because we think it's going to cost 25 grand, mostly going to Amazon for AWS hosting over the next year to continue to run Days Redistricting. It's all of our labor is free, but we have to pay for the site to get hosted.
Do let us know if that happens, because we will send it to all of the Speak Up School community.
Oh, great. I will certainly do that. That is everything I think I wanted to cover. I'll stop sharing my screen unless somebody has a question, and I'll need to go to the screen to answer that question.
Yes, leave that, because there may be. I know Heather has a question, and then let's open it up to others. Go ahead, Heather.
Yeah. Hey. So obviously, like the level of detail that you can get into is mind-boggling as far as, you know, creating your maps. And I'm wondering if you have input about how to work towards like a consensus with other groups, collaborate so that you're advocating for one, you know, one or a handful of visions as opposed to a bunch that are like a tiny bit different.
Yeah.
And that might be outside sort of the scope of your app, but I'm just, if you have perspective on how to approach that, I'd love to hear it.
So I think kind of agreeing up front on what the objectives are is probably, and this might be like no rocket science there, is probably the best way to try and get sort of sufficient consensus that you could work as collaboratively as possible. You know, there is, like you say, a tremendous amount of detail, and your question makes me want to make one point about that. You know, operate at the block level as little as you have to, because once you start splitting blocks, you're talking about, you know, 7 people, 12 people, work at the county, work at the precinct, and then only work at the block level to the extent you really need to kind of get populations down. But, you know, different states have different sets of requirements. Some of them are constitutional, some of them are legislative. Obviously, different advocacy groups have different objectives. The only real piece of advice that I have is kind of agreeing up front as best you can, because you can slice and dice this thing a million ways a Sunday, and that can become a challenge. So it's a great question. I don't think there's a sort of an ironclad answer that works in every instance, but, you know, making sure that there's agreement on what those objectives are. You know, we talked about when we were doing the compare maps thing, how there are trade-offs. Having a sense for those trade-offs. I mean, it's really interesting. You know, when you think about the sort of traditional criteria for maps, what pops up in your mind? For me, like the one I tend to think of more than any other is shapes, compact districts. Well, compact districts are a funny thing, right? Because we now have this rural-urban divide that matches very closely with a high degree of correlation, the partisan divide. If your objective is competitiveness, or your objective is proportionality, or your objective is minority representation, well, sometimes compactness works against you. And we have this notion, because of the history of gerrymandering, that funny shapes means funny business. But sometimes you kind of have to move towards funny shapes if you want proportionality. So there's this kind of odd dynamic right now in the space. And I think depending on what your objectives are, in a sense, it's getting harder and harder, because when you do look at these constitutional and legislative requirements, you'll very often see compact districts. Well, that can work against a lot of really important objectives. So you might be in an instance where there's a group that's looking solely at those, you know, it says compactness first, minimizing splits second, and not protecting incumbents third. And that's all they want to do. That can create a map that, you know, hits those objectives and looks great, but might really fail relative to other objectives. And I'll get off my soapbox now. Sorry.
Well said, David. Who else has questions about this, about how you might use this?
I had a question that I put in chat. So you can combine communities, different types of communities, so that you could create a district that doesn't split any one of those communities and includes several.
So if you're asking me, can you create 7 communities of interest and reflect them all on your single map of Washington? The answer is yes, you can. If you're asking me, can you create those 7 communities such that none of them get split by a congressional district? I think that depends on, where those communities are and how large they are geographically and, what your map looks like. But if your objective is there are 7 communities of interest that are vital to the state of Washington, and I want to make sure none of them is split, you can certainly have as an objective in building your map just that. Whether or not you can accomplish that depends on a whole bunch of other factors.
Right.
Did I
right.
answer that question right?
Well, yes, I think so. You were demonstrating a single community, and I just wondered how the tool would work with you're looking at several communities. And I think that your answer was spot on with what I was imagining.
Okay, so for example, if I go back to that Washington map, and I'm not sure what the communities I saved. So if I go back to overlays and I go to maps, I don't remember what these are. I can show well, it looks like I created a bunch in the same area. So let me just turn off this map color. So all those overlays are there. They just all happen to be in the same place. But if I created one here, it would show up. If I created one here, I could create a map that shows the N, reservations, Indian reservation lands in the state of Washington. And they could, we could show, Yakima and all the others. That's certainly something you can do. Yes.
Well, I mean, and that actually was one I was thinking of was, salmon and the reservations and how you might want to consider both of those communities, maybe not one on top of each other, but together.
Yeah.
So, yes, thank you.
And in fact, I believe it is the case that the Yakima reservation is split between 3 and 4. I'm pretty sure that's the case, right?
Yeah. And I don't know if the Colville is split. I think it's all in
Colville is
4.
also split.
Colville is also split. Yeah.
Yes.
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
Anyway,
Melissa, go ahead.
Yeah, I was wondering, and you may not know this, but we have some areas that are growing a lot more rapidly than other areas. And so what happens meaningfully is that the fast growing areas are essentially underrepresented by the time the data comes out. How much is there the ability to take that into account and to incorporate forecasts into the districting process?
So take a look at this, because that's just great. And so this map that we're looking at, these are the current congressional districts. So these shapes we're seeing, let me just get rid of the overlays just for a sec here. Okay, so these are our 10 congressional districts in the state of Washington. Okay, the population data is the 2019 ACS. Look at these population deviations. So the King County is what, districts 1, 7, 8, and 9, I think. Is that right?
Yeah.
Look at District 7.
That's where I live.
42,000 over the target pop. So in this map, the target population is 2019 population divided by 10. District 7, because of the growth of King County, is 41,000 people. Too big, right? And again, that's current population in the current shape. District 1 has had a lot of growth. District 6, which is the peninsula, has relative population shifts, is under the target population. So this map actually demonstrates just what you're describing. So if you start building your map today with the 2019 data, you can start to adjust that now, right? So District 7 is going to have to get geographically a lot smaller, right? Because the population is so big. And Castle, remember when we were talking on and I totally spaced on this, and I don't know if you want me to or not. We talked about those population shifts and what's gone on. I actually created a little exhibit.
Sure.
Is that okay? Do folks, okay, so what I need to do then, let me just stop screen sharing for a second. And let me see if I can find it. I think I can.
While you do that, David, we'll come back to you for a second.
Okay.
I want to poll the group and see how many would like to stay on for coaching and more practice. I know it's already been a big full day, but we do have those of us here who can coach. If you are somebody, go ahead and please raise hand now. If you do plan to stay on for that session, because that tells us if we want to take a break in between this or make sure that we're wrapping up completely. Awesome, thank you.
And sorry, I've run.
No,
Long.
this is a lot of what the draw was today. Honestly, this is gold, David. It's
Good.
really awesome. We wanted to make sure that everybody got as much time with this as they wanted.
My goodness, men are vastly underrepresented here. Where are all those male advocates? It's the females, it's the women leading the charge as usual, huh?
We've had a couple that are already asking for the videos because they had conflicts today. So
all right,
we'll have a little bit of a mix.
Okay, well, we know who gets the work done.
Yeah. Thank you for that. Okay, are you ready?
I am ready.
Go.
So this is kind of cool. Share screen. And maybe you folks have seen this. I hadn't until I got the 2019 data. Are you seeing my Excel?
Yes, we do.
Okay, so column A are the districts. Column B is the Washington population 2010 with the population of each district. Column C, 2019 population by district and for the whole state. Column D is the percent change over those 9 years. And then column E is just the annual change. So the state's population has grown by 10%.
Wow.
King County's population has grown by 13.7%. And you could see District 7, the one we were talking about, has grown by 16%. So you can see the dramatic change. District 6 has only grown 5%. So it's grown only just 0.6% per year, whereas District 7 has grown 1.7% a year. So the 4 highlighted districts are the districts that include parts of King County. So you can sort of get a sense for how this is going to impact what the district shapes are going to, in terms of how big or small they are now geographically, what they might end up looking like later.
What I'm wondering is, like, could you extend this and basically forecast to say 2020, 21, 2025, where do we think these districts are going to be population wise, and essentially put a few more people, and I mean, I realize this disadvantages my district, but put a few more people into the, wait, am I doing this backwards? Anyway, but basically say, like, we want to target having more equal representation midway through the decade versus knowing that the districts we draw today are going to be wrong today.
Yeah, well, I mean, that's what the Constitution, the U.S. Constitution requires. It's actually, the census. the census is dramatically out of date by the time it comes out. And this year it's going to even be more the case because all over the country, people have fled urban areas and gone to kind of less populated areas because of COVID. So one very interesting dynamic is whereas we have seen so much growth in urban areas at the expense of rural areas over the last
really
decades,
interesting.
we
Yeah, I
might
hadn't
see a
thought about that.
reversal of that
Yeah.
over this current decade.
Fascinating.
Yeah. So, I'm actually in Port Townsend, Washington right now because we like to spend a lot of time out here. And Port Townsend is going through a population boom right now. And people can't, there's housing's not available and people are moving out here because they don't want to live in Seattle anymore. So it's a really interesting dynamic where we're going to see a bit of a change. What's gone on in the Hudson Valley in New York, north of New York City has been crazy. I mean, what it's done to affordable housing and housing inventory. So it's a really kind of an interesting dynamic that we're seeing right now. But for the purposes of this 2020 census and the redistricting that's going to happen this year and next, it's all based on 2020. It's not based on what might happen in mid-decade.
That's amazing. Really awesome. David, you're the best. Thank you so much.
You're very welcome.
Really, really, everyone. I just unmute for a minute and everybody shout out your accolades.
That's okay. You don't have to do that.
Indeed. Thank you.
David.
It's all my
Thank
colleagues who
you.
built this
It
thing.
was really great.
Well,
Good.
then pass it along to your colleagues too.
I will do
really
that. I will do that.
And
And
useful.
again, as you use the service, use feedback, use YouTube, use medium.com. There's a lot of information, but we are super responsive to feedback if you have any questions or issues.
Thank you so much for your time and your talent. And
Okay. Well, thank you very much. I'm going to leave now. Thanks for all your time. Appreciate it.
all right.
Bye-bye.